Welcome to Chapter 5. I'm starting out by reading the 3 comprehension questions you have for Chapter 5. So if you were to go to your Google Slides into the Writing Freedom Comprehension questions, this is slide number 7. The first question says, what conversation does Ebenezer have with Mr. Milshark? Uh-oh. What does Ebenezer want Charlie to learn? Remember, Charlie is Charlotte. And the third question says, do you think Ebenezer knows who Charlotte really is? Give evidence from the text to support your answer. Ugh, sometimes I have a hard time with my words. Hey, by the way, I'm holding this adorable coffee cup. This is from Adelie as a gift this year. Thank you, Adelie. Wanted you to see that I'm using it. All right, here we go, Chapter 5. Remember in Chapter 4 it ended with her waking up in the loft with a pitchfork in her face. Chapter 5. Charlotte stood up and backed away from the solid-looking, bald-pated man. What are you doing in my stable? He said. I needed a place to sleep. I'm sorry, said Charlotte. Are you the one who cleaned my stalls? Yes, sir. He lowered the pitchfork and looked at Charlotte closely. She reached down and grabbed her cap and put it on. You're a scrawny-looking thing, said the man. Yes, sir. You live around here? I just moved to these parts. I'm looking for a job. Where are your folks? He asked. They live past town. We're on hard times, so they sent me to find work. How'd you get here? I helped the stage driver bed his horses. Well, I don't need any help. You get on to your home. Charlotte wanted to say that she didn't have a home. She wanted to say that she was on her own and that she needed some help. But she knew she couldn't say those things. She didn't know this man. He might turn her into Milshark for all he knew. I'll work for free if I can sleep and eat here. I can soak those birds for you and make them look like new. The man rubbed his hand over his bald head. I'm the best groomer around. I can ride and I can... His face softened. Well, you did a right smart job in our stall. The birders are pretty pitiful, and I could use a little bit of help. But I'm moving my stables to Rhode Island in a few months. Providence. So don't be getting any ideas about staying for very long. Oh. You can sleep in the loft since you're already doing it, and I've been mucking and raking for weeks without a boy, but I don't tolerate no trouble. No, sir, said Charlotte. Name's Ebenezer Balch. Go on over there and eat in the cafe and tell 'em I sent you. Then come back and get to work. You sure are scrawny for a grown boy. Ebenezer told her that he'd gone through some more stable boys than he cared to amount and that they had all been lazy pigs. Charlotte was determined to show him that she was reliable. She put in long hours in the stable, cleaning stalls and forking hay and grooming and feeding the horses. She was the first one up in the morning and she was the last to bed at night, and if there was time, she mended the harnesses without even being asked. She kept thinking that maybe if she worked hard enough, Ebenezer would need help in Rhode Island too. But more than that, she really loved those horses. Always talking and clucking with them like they were her babies, and before long she could coax even the stubborn ones to do almost anything with just murmuring of her voice. The stock tenders shook their heads in amazement, and more than once Charlotte caught Ebenezer watching her with the horses. She'd been there several months when he came into the tack room. He looked unhappy. Charlie, sit down. Charlotte knew what was coming. All the preparations had been made to move the business. An uncertain fear crept over her. What would she do if Ebenezer left? Ebenezer cleared his throat and said, A man was in town this morning telling about a runaway girl from an orphanage all the way from New Hampshire. He said that she might have drowned up the river, but might have lived too. He's going up and down the stage line looking for her. Wanted to know if I knew anything about her, 'cause hear tell she's good with horses, and she'd come up missing about the time that you showed up here. Do you know anything about her? Charlotte looked down at the girdle that she held in her hands, and she felt the blood draining from her face. No, sir, she said. She didn't like lying to Ebenezer. Well, I told him that I'd never seen or heard of nothing. He wanted to know if I had a stable boy. I didn't like the looks and the sounds of him one bit. She said that she, I'm sorry, said that he was ready to punish the girl and wanted to find her in the worst way. Acted like he wanted to come poking around my stables. I told him there ain't no use, that all I had laying around my place was top-notch stockmen and stock tenders. Ain't that right? Yes, sir, said Charlie. Anyhow, ain't been no girls around here and there. Has there? Ebenezer stepped back and looked at Charlotte in a way that he never had before. Did he know? Charlotte winced. No, sir, she said. Well, that's what I told him. So she probably did drown. Yep, that's what I think. Drowned in that river. Ain't that sad? He cleared his throat. Now, another thing. I don't think this fellow is going to give up easy, as cocky as he is. I suspect that he'll be asking around town and probably showing up to ask questions. Everyone knows that I got a new hand. Charlotte nodded and her mouth felt so dry. What if Milshark showed up here and Ebenezer got in trouble for hiring her? The thought of Mr. Milshark finding her and taking her back to the orphanage made her palms sweaty, made her heart pound. Maybe she should leave. But leaving would mean that she would have to start all over again, and she would need to find some place to work, and sleep, and eat, and hide. Charlotte stood up and dropped the bridle. She edged towards the door. I need to get on home, since you're moving to the stables and all. I best get going. Ebenezer held up both of his hands to block her way. Just stay put, he said. Now listen, in all my days I only seen one other person work so well with horses like you. Could put a spell on them, and could ride them, and could well, I only seen it one other time. I got a notion. Maybe I'm crazy, but I gotta see if I'm right. If you can do what I think you can do, I'm not about to let you go. As Ebenezer walked out of the tack room, he said, Bring around 6 horses. I need a wagon hitched. Charlotte tried to concentrate on what he had just said. Bring around 6 horses? Do what? She thought. Do what she thought he could do? Confused, she found the traces for 6 in the hand and brought the horses around at one time to hitch them. When each horse was secured to the traces, Ebenezer said, Charlie, you drive. Charlotte stared at Ebenezer. I ain't drove 6 of them in my hand before, she said. I drove 2, but not 6. I know that, said Ebenezer. Get up here and let's take a run unless you're scared. I ain't scared, said Charlotte. She climbed into the wagon. What was Ebenezer up to? She felt like he was testing her, almost daring her to drive the team. He handed her a whip, but she wouldn't take it. She never liked to whip a horse in her life. It's for guiding your team by the sound, not for beating the poor horse. Now here are the ribbons, same as the reins. Hold them in your left hand and keep the whip in your right, he said. She took the whip and the ribbons and listened. Each of these pairs of ribbons controls 2 horses, so when you're driving 6, you're holding 3 pairs of ribbons. It ain't easy as it looks. Here's the pressure brake on the right, and here's your footwork for it. Now, release the brake and take her a mile around and turn around. Since the day Charlotte had caught Stage and Concord, she wanted to try a 6-horse team. She wanted to know what it felt like behind all those horses. Suddenly, she was getting her chance. She yelled, Get along! Charlotte held the ribbons tightly and tried to keep the wagon straight on the road, but it veered to the right and then to the left, and then she had it hitched enough times to understand how the reins worked. But Ebenezer was right. It wasn't as easy as it looked. No one had to tell her, though, not to whip those horses. Charlotte gave gentle tugs on the ribbons, but even a slight pull sent the horses in the other direction. As she approached the turns, the reins tangled, and some horses turned and some didn't, and the wagon rolled into the horses, and suddenly she was in the middle of a heap of harnesses and horses. Ebenezer climbed out and set everything upright. Guess I was wrong, he said, and he gave her a peculiar look. Maybe you're just too young to learn the ribbons. Let's head back. I ain't ready to turn back, Charlotte said, and she began to feel her escape from Mr. Milshark depending on being able to drive the team. Ebenezer climbed back in, and Charlotte set out. With a steadier hand, she pulled the horses back on course. She tried another turn again, muddled in the horse's wagon. Ebenezer got out and straightened the lines. But before he could say anything, Charlotte reached for the reins. I can do it, she insisted. Charlotte took the reins again and again. Although she continued to get jumbled in the turns, with each turn she felt an exhilaration that she has never felt before. Here were 6 strong horses waiting for her commands, her tugs on the reins to tell them which way to go. She yelled haw and gee to get them to bear left and right, like she did when she was riding the horse of a driving 2. I had to flip back a page because there's a really cool picture of her as Charlie. Remember, she's the boy now, and she's driving the stage, and you see all the reins that she's having to control. She wished Hayward could see her, and Vern. Vern would have never let her go out on a wagon until she figured out the turns. Just like when he taught her to ride, he kept putting her back on freedom after each fall, saying, every time you fall, you learn something new about your horse. You learn what not to do next time. That's what was happening with this team. Every time she mixed up the reins, she knew what she had done wrong, and she tried not to do it again. And after a dozen runs, she brought them around clean. Ebenezer finally nodded his approval with a small, satisfied smile. He wanted her to figure it out. He wanted her to be able to drive the team. But why? When they pulled back up to the stables, Ebenezer said, Charlie, or whoever you are, I need this team and this wagon to drive to my new stables, and I'm figuring that you can drive them. But you need to leave in the morning before first light, and there's something else. I don't need more stable boys in Rhode Island, but I need another stock tender, and soon I'll be needing coach drivers. You got a lot to learn, but I could train you up if it suits you. She couldn't stop the grin that was spread over her face. It suits me fine, she said. And that is the end of our chapter, guys. So that's the end of your lesson today. Please make sure that you go answer your comprehension questions. Actually, while this video is uploading, I get to go and give dojo points to my students who completed their questions yesterday. So I'm so happy and thankful about that. And I saw a lot of really good improvements with your writing. So make sure you're answering those things in full questions. That just makes me so proud and so happy. All right, y'all. I'll see you tomorrow. We will be reading In the Middle tomorrow and chapter 6. So see you tomorrow.